Hello YouTube, SentinalhMC back again for episode 5 of our RotaryCraft tutorial series. So last episode I showed you how to set up an automatic farm. One thing I want to show you is that I've redesigned my farm. Now in this tutorial world, the setup I had last time worked perfectly fine. The seeds got pushed to the end and collected by the hoppers. But I built this in a single player world. I don't know what was going on, but for some reason the seeds were not being pushed at all. They were just popping off and landing where they sat. So if that happens to you, you can set up something like this with a vacuum hopper from open blocks somewhere in the middle, and as long as it's not more than 3 or 4 blocks away from the away from this, that seeds will drop. The seeds will always get sucked up. So if you're having that problem, then this is something you can do. I don't know what causes that problem, but that's my method of getting around it. Anyway, in this episode we're going to look at how to use the canola seeds that we farm from our canola plants. We've got a lot of them here, to make lubricant, which is a incredibly necessary... I just got rid of my screwdriver. Which is a necessary component when you start getting into the power system, because you need them for gearboxes, which we'll cover in the next episode. So, to get lubricant from canola, you need to use a grinder. I can't hold that in my hand, apparently. And the grinder is crafted like this in a work table, and it requires 2 of these saws. And saws are pretty easily crafted with a gear and 4 steel ingots. And it's important that you need to put the steel ingots in the corners, because if you put them in the centers of the rows, you get an impeller. So make sure you put them in the corners, and that gives you 1 saw, so you're going to need 2 of them. So 3 base panels, 2 saws, and a steel gear, and 2 steel ingots gets you a grinder. Now, the way the grinder works is that all you have to do is provide it with some power. But if you notice this isn't working, I can't just put the grinder next to this steam engine, because if we pop into the handbook, I think the grinder shows up here. The grinder requires 4,096 watts, which is fine because that's only a quarter of what our steam engine is producing, so we're good there. But it needs to have that at 128 newton meters of torque, whereas our steam engine supplies only 32 newton meters. So now we're getting into machines that require a specific amount of torque. So what you need to do is either build an engine that outputs that amount of torque, or we can make another component that will allow us to use the steam engine, because it will convert the power and give us more torque at a slower speed. And to do that, we're going to create the worm gear. Now, the worm gear is a type of gearbox that is very limited in what it can do. It only increases torque. It cannot be flipped around to do the opposite. So, and it has power loss. So you don't really want to use these too much. But in the very early game, especially before you have lubricant to make gearboxes, otherwise they get damaged, the worm gear will work. So the worm gear is crafted with a mount and a worm gear, which I don't know why they have the same name, but they do. It's the worm gear item and the mount. So we'll take a look at how to make them. The worm gear item is crafted very simply with a gear and 2 shaft units like so. Gives you the worm gear. And the mount, which is also used for a lot of other things, is crafted with 4 steel ingots, 2 on a side, and a base panel. And if you are using an ME system, you may want to teach this recipe as well to your crafting system, because you are going to need quite a few mounts, because they're also used for higher end shaft units, and they're used for gearboxes and things like that. So once you have those, you can craft the worm gear with a mount, a gear, 2 shaft units, and the worm gear item. And the worm gear, when I place it against this steam engine, it looks really cool for one. But what this is doing is it's taking the speed of the steam engine and it's lowering the speed and increasing the torque. If I look at the handbook and we go to power transfer and we click on, where is the worm gear? That's the gearbox there. It's in here somewhere. There it is, worm gear. The worm gear has a 16:1 ratio, so if you want to figure that out, all you have to do, take the speed, divide it by 16, take the torque, multiply it by 16, that's what you get, I'm pretty sure. But it's inefficient, like it says. It loses some of its power, leading to much slower output speeds. So the output speed is a lot slower than it even would be if you used a gearbox, and that goes up as the speed does. So you don't want to put high speed into the worm gear. But what will happen is one worm gear on a steam engine is enough to power the grinder. Now you see that the grinder is actually turning. Now you don't want to step on this. I can't demonstrate because I'm not in survival, but if you stand on top of the grinder while it's running, it will hurt you. So maybe you can use it for a mob grinder later on. But if I pull out my angular transducer, we'll see that the power is the grinder is receiving 14 kilowatts at 29 revs. Now we know that this outputs 16 kilowatts, so it's losing about 2 kilowatts, maybe 1 and some fraction kilowatts of power, and it's very slow at 29 revs. But it now has enough torque to run our grinder, and to be quite honest, the grinder runs at a decent rate at this speed. So if I throw some canola seeds in here, this is the thing, by the way, showing you that we have enough power, speed, and torque. The grinder will run with this amount of power, and if I look at it, it will take 30 seconds to process each seed. Now obviously this is not very quick, but if you set this up and then go do something else and come back later, once you have 1,000 lubricant, because this is in millibuckets, you'll be able to grab a bucket of lube and use it for a gearbox, and putting a gearbox on this will speed it up. However, in my testing, using a 4-to-1 gearbox, which is what you have to use off a steam engine to power this, only increases its speed by about 7 seconds. So I don't think it's all that necessary. But yeah, this is probably the first way you might want to power your grinder, unless you want to make a higher tier engine, but you don't need to because you can use steam. And since this never decays and there's no durability, you can leave this running forever. Just keep feeding it canola seeds. So that's how you get the grinder. Now, once the grinder is set up and grinding, you can obviously put buckets in here to grab out the lubricant, but there's another way to do it, and that's using lubricant hoses. And those are crafted simply with 6 wood planks and 3 blocks of glass. It gives you 16 lubricant hoses. And what these do, as you can imagine, is transfer the lubricant around. Often to either to a machine or into a reservoir. I thought this was a good time to mention that the reservoir, like a tank, you craft it with 7 base panels like so, and they're quite scalable. So if I go ahead and place this as a reservoir, the reservoir holds, I believe, 64 buckets of liquid, but if you put them next to each other, they connect. Now, it'll still only say that it has a 64,000 capacity, but that's 64,000 millibuckets, so 64 buckets per block. And you can make this any size, any shape that you want. I can even make a donut. So these can be scaled. You can't stack them, at least it doesn't look like you can. I haven't actually tried it, but that's the reservoir. You can input the liquid to the top or the sides, and you can output it from the sides as well. Or maybe only I'm not sure. I think you can output it from the sides. Otherwise, I know it works from the bottom. So yeah, that's that. So if I show you, I go ahead and the grinder only outputs its lubricant from the bottom. Oh, I guess it does output from the side. Never mind. Maybe that was changed. I seem to remember having a single-player world quite a while ago where it would not output from the sides, but apparently it does. Now, the interesting thing about these lubricant pipes, lubricant hoses, is that they have an internal storage amount, and they actually store quite a bit. So that's 160, and now that's going down to 123. So if you break these when they're full, you do end up losing a decent amount of lubricant, so you want to be careful. But as you can see, you actually can't output from the bottom anymore. I swear that's how I used to have to do it. Maybe I'm just going crazy. But anyway, now we know. And the more you know. So that's the grinder. It's running quite slowly. Now, the way to speed this up is to add more speed. So if you increase the the speed that you're putting in, you increase the operational speed. But you have to make sure you always have the minimum torque. That's the balancing act with the, well, tell me how much is output, yeah. That is the balancing act of the power system in RotaryCraft. So right now, we're producing it at 512 rads, but the worm gear is taking it all the way down to 29. Ideally, usually that would be, I think, 32 at 4-to-1, but since the worm gear lowers the efficiency, but anyway, it works fine. So now that we've got our grinder and we've got it running to produce our first, bucket or so of lubricant. What are we going to do with it? Well, one thing we can do with it is by using it with the Hydrokinetic Engine. So it's our other green power option along with the windmill, so water power. It's very powerful, but it's very tricky, a bit complicated. Let's show how to craft it. So the Hydrokinetic Engine is crafted with 8 of these paddle panels, and it's simply 9 base panels. So each one of these is going to require 3 steel ingots. So this requires 9. Yeah, each one of these 3 steel ingots, and you just need to place 8 of them around a shaft core to get a Hydrokinetic Engine. Now, if we come over here, I have a little demonstration set up. I've placed the Hydrokinetic Engine. Now, the Hydrokinetic Engine requires empty space around it, a 3x3 square of empty space. If I grab some cobblestone and I place this like so, with the Hydrokinetic Engine placed at the center, you cannot place anything else here, including water or the liquids. Don't do it. It doesn't work. If I grab a Hydrokinetic Engine and place it, maybe it doesn't look like it does, but it does overlap. And if I break this, I can't place it in there because there's no space. I can place it here. I can't place it there either. I can place it like now because it will place flat against the side. So that's how it works. So it takes a little, just make sure you've given it enough space. So make sure it has space underneath it and on all of its sides. So the setup I have right here is Hydrokinetic Engine with some lubricant hose with a tank of lubricant, reservoir lubricant over top. So you can put in the lubricant from the side that you're not using for the power output. Power does output only to one side. You'll notice when I go ahead and place it, only one of the 2 sides has the power output. And so I've got a bevel gear going into this thing, which we'll talk about in a second. But another important thing about the Hydrokinetic Engine, if I go into the book, is that it only rotates counterclockwise. So make sure that you've got the water going on the right side. So if you have a waterfall falling down it and it's not turning, then have the water go down the other side, and it will turn. But it won't turn without lubricant, okay? So you notice it has a 24,000 millibucket internal storage. If there's no lubricant in here, it won't turn. It doesn't break, it just doesn't turn. It'll quit turning if you run out of lubricant. So make sure you have lube in it when you go to test whether it'll work or not. So this little block here, we'll talk about now, is the dynamometer. And the dynamometer does the same thing that the angular transducer does, sort of, but it's a permanent block, and it updates, and you can just look at it. So the dynamometer is crafted. It's a great diagnostic tool for your power systems. Crafted with a shaft unit, a mount, see that again, an ender pearl, so it's a little expensive, and a screen. Now the screen is crafted with a circuit board, a glass pane, and 4 steel ingots. And the circuit board has 2 recipes. This recipe yields 1 circuit board and will grant and requires these items. So 3 electrum ingots, 3 HSLA steel ingots, a copper ingot, and 2 redstone. But if I replace the electrum with gold and the copper with an ender pearl, then I get 2. So if you've got a lot of ender pearls and gold, go ahead and do this. If you don't have these resources in spades, go ahead and use the other recipe. But then you can craft the screen, and then you can craft the dynamometer. And all the dynamometer does is you just place it down in your shaft system. It has the same function as a shaft, but it will display the amount of power, torque, and speed that's running through it. So in just a second you'll be able to see. So it's great for, especially for the hydrokinetic one, because when you're first setting this up, it'll start, you'll have to decide the height of the waterfall that you want. This is a great tool. So the way the hydrokinetic engine produces power is by having water fall on it. And since Minecraft has very odd water physics, the way that that's been done in the mod is that the farther it falls, the more power is produced. So the bigger a stack of water is above the hydrokinetic engine, the more power it outputs. So if I were to go ahead and place the water source right here, it gets kind of messy. But you'll notice that it is turning, but it's only producing 226 watts. Although it's doing it at 226 newton meters of torque. And obviously this is nothing. This is no power at all. The DC engine produces 1 kilowatt, so this is completely useless. Where'd my cobblestone go? Let me get my cobblestone back so I can get rid of this water source. So we'll block that off. I do like this. It animates, it turns, it makes a sound. It's pretty cool. So why don't we go up here to 10? So this would be like a 10 block waterfall. And I don't know if this is true or not, if this is accurate, but I'm counting this from the center of the hydrokinetic engine. So when I counted this, I started at this block here, right level with the engine. I'm not sure if that's correct, but that's what I'm going for here. So if I place my water source at the 10 mark, I'm now outputting not quite as much power as the DC engine. The DC engine produces 1.024 kilowatts, and this is only producing 1.013 kilowatts, which is a bit of a shame. If it was doing 1.024, it would be kind of nice, but it's not. But notice the torque. It's all torque. The hydrokinetic engine has the highest torque of any engine in the game, but ridiculously low speeds. I mean, look how slow this bevel gear is turning. So that's another caveat with the hydrokinetic engine, is that you're going to have to use gearboxes to transform the power to actually use it with anything, and we'll talk about that in the next episode in depth. But I want to talk about something interesting. There's a very interesting interaction between blocks 10 and 11. Right now it's producing 1013. Look what happens if I go ahead and add another block. One extra block, and we're now producing 2354. Okay? And I think that does that because that is the point at which the game adds 1 more radian per second, which obviously doubles the output when you multiply it with the torque. So there's literally no reason to ever have the waterfall be 10 blocks high, because 11 doubles the output. This happens again up at 20 and 21. Which we'll show you now. At 20 blocks high, the engine begins producing 14 kilowatts, almost 15 kilowatts, but a little bit shy of the steam engine as far as overall power is concerned at 5 rads. So we got 14 kilowatts here. Now look what happens when we go up 1 more block. 1 more block, and we go from 14 to 19. So we've now added like 5, or kind of like 4.4 kilowatts, but quite a large increase for only 1 more water block high. So keep an eye on that. It seems to happen at these 10 to 11, 20 to 21 marks, because if I go up 1 more block, so let's actually just do that, the increase will not be as substantial. See, it only went up by a little bit. But between the 10 and 11 and the 20 and 21, it goes up significantly. Now, let's go all the way up to the engine's maximum output. This is a 64 block high waterfall. Takes a while for the water to fall, but this will cause the engine to produce its maximum amount of power. There we go, it's connected. And now our engine is producing 524 kilowatts of power at 16 kilonewton meters at only 32 radians per second. That is an enormous amount of power. An enormous amount of power. Right? At a very high torque, but very slow speed. That's what the hydrokinetic engine does. And here's the amazing thing about the hydrokinetic engine. It's completely scalable. Let me show you what I'm talking about when I say that. If I grab another hydrokinetic engine, and I'm going to bash this off. If I grab another hydrokinetic engine, and I have to build this out a bit. And I place it here. First of all, you'll notice that the lubricant has evened out between them. And if I place a lubricant hose here and a reservoir here, Why isn't it connected? Oh, this isn't turned right, I bet. Nope. Oops. There we go. Now it's it's still not connecting. It's odd. Not really sure why. Interesting. But anyway, if I go up here and I drop water on that one as well, where'd my stone block go? Just by doing that. And we'll get rid of these. And these. Did you hear that? Did you hear the clink clink sound for a split second? That's because these weren't running at the same speed. But now they are running at the same speed. And what we're getting is double the power. That's right, these water wheels are completely scalable. For every additional one that you add, it adds its torque at the same speed. So one more hydrokinetic engine, now we have a megawatt. Okay, we've got a megawatt of power with 2 of these. So as you can see, these things are really powerful, these hydrokinetic engines. But like you may notice, they are quite finicky. I would consider hydrokinetic engines to be a stationary power source. They're an emplaced power source. You build the system and it stays there forever. You build it right where you want to put it and you never move it. Because of the setup it requires. There are other power sources that you can move around. You can easily set up a steam engine wherever you want one. Of course, you can easily plop one of these down. But hydrokinetic engines require quite a bit of setup, more infrastructure. Kind of like windmills. You got to build up a big pillar, and it takes more time. But the payoff for these things is massive. I mean, look at that. A megawatt of power. So you get a lot of power out of these things. They do run on lubricant. But you can quite easily, this is going to be kind of funny, you can quite easily use them to power a grinder. So if you do that, you'll find something quite interesting. Although in order to find that interesting thing, I only want one of these. But anyway, let's set this properly. That's the black side. It's turning. But yeah, take a look at this. Even though we're feeding a megawatt into this grinder, it's still running at 29 seconds per operation. That's because the speed is 32. The grinder does not increase its operational speed with extra power. It's extra speed. You must increase the speed going into this to reduce its operating time. But if we go and we grab some canola, notice how this has been churning away. It's already burned through half of the stack and produced quite a bit of lube while we've been talking. If I feed this in and then use the lubricant hoses, you can just run it like this. You can put a grinder, you can power it off of a hydrokinetic engine, and you can use lubricant hose to pipe it in. The thing about it, if I get rid of this one, is that this engine uses less lubricant, significantly less lubricant than this produces in the time. Okay, so if you do this, if you use a hydrokinetic engine to power a grinder, it'll go forever. As long as you keep canola seeds in this, the grinder will always keep up. Okay? No matter how slowly it's turning. Like, at this speed, I'm pretty sure it'll still keep up. Because this doesn't use lubricant very fast. So what you'll end up doing, and I'll show you this next episode, is you'll use shaft junctions at different ratios, as well as gearboxes, to give this only as much power as you need it to have to keep this going. And then all the extra power, you do whatever you want with it. So next episode, we'll be focusing entirely on more advanced power transfer techniques so that you can make use of the massive amount of power this thing is putting out. And then the episode after that, we'll talk about probably the other another engine. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope that we didn't cover too much in one episode for you to keep track of it all. But I'm pretty I feel like I've gone over it enough that you kind of understand how this works. The Hydrokinetic Engine, you don't have to have a 64 block high fall for it to become worth it. As you can tell, even if it was only half as far, it's still worth it. But you know, if you want maximum efficiency, you need to have that 64 block tall thing. But at 15, it'll produce enough power to run a grinder, and maybe a little bit more. So with the Hydrokinetic Engine, you can scale it. You can keep increasing it. You noticed how when I added another block right above where the previous source was, it still counted it. So you can build one of these. You could have a 15 block high waterfall, and as your power demands increase, simply make the stack taller up to 64 and get more power. So yeah, the grinder, the Hydrokinetic Engine, I hope you know how to use those now. The grinder can be used to produce other materials, but we'll go over that in future videos when we get to the point where we're going to actually be using those. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. It's probably quite a bit longer than the other ones, but we covered a lot. So stay tuned for the next episode where we'll cover a more advanced power transfer, and we'll cover gearboxes specifically, the main use of lubricant. I'm SentinalhMC, and I'm signing out.